So Dr. Miller is a very accomplished man. Dr. Miller holds multiple degrees in physical science, including an earned master's degree from the University of Texas in Arlington and a PhD in biomechanical engineering from Auburn University, with emphasis in thermodynamics, biothermal science, biotransport phenomena, and navigation and control of biological systems. He has published research internationally in peer-reviewed technical science journals and is an active member of several science societies. While at Auburn University, he also instructed courses in thermodynamics, fluid mechanical and heat transfer, as well as statistics and dynamics. He has participated in several creation geological expeditions with leading creation geologists studying seismite. This is where we're going to have troubles, right? Seismite, dinosaur fossil beds, and the Grand Canyon, and is currently studying hypogene speleogenesis in North American caves. He currently serves as the full-time science writer for Apologetics Press, the associate editor of the monthly Christian Evidences journal, Reason and Revelation, and the editor of the Apologetics Press Bible class curriculum. He also serves as an instructor for the Bear Valley Bible Institute, teaching Christian Evidences. Dr. Miller is the author of several books, including Science vs. Evolution, Flooded, In the Way He Should Go, and Dating Without Detonating. He is married to Julie and has 5 children. I encourage you to give him your good attention. We are going to learn a lot this weekend.
All right, I am excited to be here. My wife and I don't think we've ever been this far to the Northeast, and so it's exciting to be here, especially at this time of year too. Just beautiful, and we're hoping, you probably don't hope for this, but we're hoping it'll snow while we're here, because we don't really experience that in Alabama much at all. Every 5 years we get basically a little dusting, that's about it. And also it's really exciting to see so many Christians from all over the place up here in the Northeast, and willing to come together for something like this. It's not like there's other things you couldn't be doing. You could be watching people throw around a piece of leather with air in it on a Friday night, I'm sure, up here. So appreciate you being here and being willing to travel with me through a lot of material. If you did not get one of these, then this would be recommended. This is a way to kind of keep on track with what I'll be covering this weekend, and there's fill in the blank there and so forth to make sure that you are on target with me as we go through a lot of material this weekend. Also, this book, Flooded, that I wrote 2 or 3 years ago, covers a lot of the material that I'll be covering this weekend, and even more in depth. It's written on about a 9th grade level, loaded with images and so forth, so it's not real technical, unlike some of the other materials that you might find of mine on our website. But this is written on a very layman level where you can understand these things, and it'll help fill in some of the gaps that you might miss this weekend as we travel through a lot of material in a short amount of time, and I think your brains will be hurting. But my legs and hips are going to be hurting, so, and lower back from standing here as we go through it. So no complaining, right? Let's plow through some material together. I think it'll be enjoyable to you as we do this. It's a very faith-affirming seminar, and I hope that you'll find it to be such. Also, be aware that our last session on Sunday after lunch, correct me if I'm wrong, David, where'd you go? Is actually a Q&A, and so there'll be some things probably come up in the seminar where you might have some questions about this, and so that'll be at some time set aside where we can delve into go down some rabbit holes and chase some things that maybe I didn't have time to talk about, and those are always a lot of fun. All right, we spend a lot of time in the church and where I work at Apologetics Press countering evolution, okay? And we have to do that because the statistics show that it is eroding faith in the Bible in a widespread way in the church and outside of the church in Christendom at large. There's a mass exodus going on in the church over that issue statistically. And so we as Christians need to examine the evidence, prepare ourselves, and counter evolution. And we spend a lot of time at AP doing that, have a lot of materials that deal with that subject. But what about our side, our perspective, our model? The evolutionists turn around and point the finger at us and say, you guys are spending all this time trying to pick holes in our model, but we at least have a model. What do you guys have? I mean, what we have is better than what you guys have, and we at least have a model, a framework that we can use to do science. Creation can't even claim to be scientific without a legitimate model, they'll say. And so in 2007, famous skeptic Michael Shermer, who Kyle Butt that works at Apologetic Express, he debated him 2 or 3 weeks ago. But he published a book where he tried to make a case against intelligent design and creation and make the case for evolution. A very influential writer and had a monthly column in Scientific American for years. Here's one of the things he said in his book. For creationists to disprove evolution, they need to unravel all these independent lines of evidence that he talks about in his book, which we've done, as well as construct a rival theory that can explain them, the evidences, better than the theory of evolution. They have yet to do so, he said. He said, intelligent design creationists have no science to speak of. If creationists want their doctrines taught in public school science classes, they need first to develop a science and then to convince scientists that their scientific ideas merit inclusion based on the quality of the arguments and the evidence. Famous philosopher from the 1800s, Herbert Spencer, he said, those who cavalierly reject the theory of evolution as not adequately supported by facts seem quite to forget that their own theory is supported by no facts at all. Whenever you hear one side of the story, it's easy to believe that side, isn't it? Proverbs 18:17 weighs in on that. But it's amazing how often you can change your position once you actually get an opportunity to hear the other side, the side that has been silenced for decades now, where people don't even know the tremendous amount of evidence that actually is against evolution and for creation. So notice again the second half of Shermer's challenge here. We need a rival theory that can explain the evidence better than evolution. And according to him, we have not done that. So this is a real argument that evolutionists, particularly in the science community, are using against creation. So notice that defeating error, is important. But that doesn't teach the truth, see? What that does is leave an empty vacuum that has to be filled with the actual truth. I mean, you can eliminate a false idea, but that doesn't teach what the real idea should be. So how do we know that we're right? Biblical creation. Does the evidence actually support that, or do we have a blind faith in creation? Do we have a model that could be used as a framework to make sense of all the evidence around us in the physical universe? So in this heavily scientific age, these are crucial questions that our young people need answers to, and unfortunately what we're seeing is they're not being given the answers when they need it, and so they're falling away. There's a mass exodus from the church going on. The law of rationality in philosophy says one should only draw those conclusions that are warranted by the evidence. Right? In other words, you should only believe the things that you can prove, that can be substantiated. Somebody says, I think the boogeyman lives under my bed. Okay, prove it. Let's follow the evidence wherever it leads, and that is how you should draw conclusions. And this is a biblical idea. 1 Thessalonians 5:21, examine everything carefully and hold fast to that which is good, or test all things, hold fast that which is good. This is the idea that God expects us to look at the evidence, weigh the evidence before we come to believe something. The Bible does not endorse a blind faith. Evidence is important to God, and it should be important to us. God does not want us to blindly believe that He exists, that the Bible is His Word. He expects us to weigh the evidence and come to the right conclusion based on that evidence, to know the truth that'll set us free, John 8:32. So biblical faith in God is not blind. It's not a blind leap, hoping that there's somebody there in the dark that's going to catch you. That would be fideism. According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, reliance on faith, this is talking about blind faith, rather than reason in pursuit of religious truth. Okay, so notice that modern dictionaries put faith in contrast to reasoning, evidence. Why? because that's what the bulk of the religious world around us has come to believe about faith. And so the dictionaries are merely articulating that to us. All dictionaries do is tell us how words are being used today by people. So biblical faith, though, when you look at how faith is used in the Bible, it is faith, it is belief, it is trust based on evidence, like the faith or trust you would have in a parent, a spouse, a friend, because that person has proven themselves to be trustworthy. See, it's not a blind faith. Our faith, our belief, our trust in anybody is based on evidence. And that is the kind of faith God expects us to have with regard to the feelings that we have towards Him. God has left evidence for us in many forms, and perhaps the most obvious is the evidence that He has left us in nature around us that shout out from the things that are made. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the creation, the things that are made. Even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Nobody's going to be able to stand on Judgment Day and say to God, you didn't give me enough proof. It's not my fault. You can't do that. Because the evidence is without excuse. There's so much. It's clearly seen that if a person chooses not to believe in God, he's being irrational. He is drawing conclusions not warranted by the evidence. We have to be ready to fill the void that we leave when we finish dealing with things like evolution, and fill that void with a model that can be shown to harmonize with the actual evidence. Fill that void with the true model of our origins. Notice, before other models fill in the gap, right? Because there's other models out there that are ready to step in there and fill that gap where would be atheistic thinking. So again, refuting error is good. We got to go to the next level and also teach the truth. Now that is what we want to do this weekend. That's the goal of this whole seminar. We're going to systematically make the case for biblical creation and build this from the ground up. So if you want to try to do that, you want to try to convince somebody, say a naturalist. A naturalist is somebody that only believes in natural things, no supernatural. So no God in the picture. Now, if you want to actually build the biblical creation model from the ground up in a systematic way based on the evidence, then first, of course, you're going to have to be able to show that the evidence substantiates that there must be a supernatural God. And then you need to show that that God is specifically the God of the Bible, as opposed to the million gods of Hinduism or many of the other gods that humans have made up. And then show that the Bible actually is His Word. And then you have to lay out what the Bible actually says happened with regard to the origin of the universe and the history of the earth, that'll make it where you can then make sense of the physical evidence around us in the universe and approach the universe around us in the right way. So then you want to show that that model is scientifically valid. And what we mean is the evidence actually supports it. It is able to explain the evidence and even make scientific predictions based on that evidence. And then you have to show that this is a robust model. What we mean by that is it can withstand scientific scrutiny and criticism. It can stand up to that kind of weathering that is given by scientists that are trying to disprove it. And so this is what we want to do this weekend. So let's look at the very first plank. How can we know that there is a God when you can't actually see Him, taste Him, touch Him, smell Him, hear Him, right? Plank number one. Now, in studying the created order over the centuries, humans have reasoned through from the evidence and articulated many excellent philosophical arguments that all point to the conclusion that there has to be a supernatural God. Okay, and these are arguments which, fight though atheists have tried to do over the centuries, continue to stand as testaments for the existence of God. These have never been able to be refuted. Blair Scott, of American Atheists, he said concerning the classical arguments for the existence of God, the theological arguments have not changed much over thousands of years. And he meant that as a jab, a scoff. But really, he's right. The classical arguments haven't had to change much over the centuries, other than gathering more and more evidence to support them, because truth doesn't need to change. They have never been able to refute these arguments. In fact, Ironically, Fred Hoyle, this is the guy that actually coined the term Big Bang. He said you should be suspicious of a theory if more and more hypotheses are needed to support it. And this is so ironic that this perfectly describes evolutionary theories. If you've got to keep tweaking things in order to try to explain the evidence just never seems to fit with what you believe, then you should be suspicious of that theory. And you should consider the possibility that maybe you need to jump ship on this and pick something else. Well, the classical arguments have continued to stand the test of time. So, for example, the moral argument. Humans intuitively know that there is right and wrong, what we call objective moral value. Objective moral value is value that isn't based on human opinion. It's not what you say is right or what I say is right. It is above us. It's already right regardless of what we think about it. So right and wrong that we all understand is right and wrong for everybody in every location, every time, that would be objective morality. Now, an objective moral system that is above humanity cannot have been made by humanity. And so by implication, there would have to be a moral being above humanity that created that moral system. So this is what we call the moral argument. Now, if atheism is true, then there's no such thing as objective right and wrong, okay? It's just opinion. Richard Dawkins, in his book, The God Delusion, he said, absolutist moral discrimination is devastatingly undermined by the fact of evolution. So in other words, if evolution is true, which is what he believes in, then there would be no absolute morality. That wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be truth that everybody is subject to, right and wrong, that is beyond us, above us, controlling sense of what is right and wrong. February 1998, William Provine, who's a professor of evolutionary biology at Cornell, he laid out several of the undeniable implications of atheism of that whole worldview in a speech. And notice number 3 on the list. According to naturalistic, atheistic evolutionary perspective, no ultimate foundation for ethics exists if atheism is true. And notice also that he said that Charles Darwin understood that perfectly whenever he developed modern evolutionary theory. So what's he talking about? Here's what Darwin said in his autobiography. A man who has no assured and ever-present belief in the existence of a personal God or of a future existence with retribution and reward can have for his rule of life, as far as I can see, only to follow those impulses and instincts which are the strongest or which seem to him the best ones. So there's no right and wrong if the evolutionary model is true. There's just opinion and impulses. There may be stronger people that can push their way on others, but that doesn't make it necessarily right or wrong. French existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, he said, everything is indeed permitted if God does not exist. So if there is no God, there's no higher being that can tell us the absolute rule that we're all subject to. There would just be opinions, and again, stronger people that can enforce their opinions on others, but not actual truth. Now, atheists kind of play their hand on this because they have trouble sticking to that idea that there really is no such thing as morality that is above mankind, that everyone has to be beholden to, because we all know that there are things that are too heinous not to consider to be objectively wrong. It doesn't matter who does it. Dan Barker is a pretty notorious atheist and debater. He wrote the book Godless, with a little g, in which Richard Dawkins wrote the foreword. He's the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And Kyle Budd at AP, he debated him back in 2009. So during the Q&A period, Kyle Budd asked Barker if it would be acceptable to rape a girl in order to save humanity from an alien race, which the evolutionary community has to believe exists, that there's aliens out there. Watch him stumble over himself trying to stay consistent with his position on this. It'd be horrible. It'd be regrettable. I would hate myself. I'd probably kill myself after doing it. Okay, why would you do that, by the way? You got a conscience, okay? But I would have the courage. Why would it take courage? If that was the only option. If that were the only option, I would go through it. I would pity that woman. I'd pity myself. But morality would require me to take the course of action that results in the least amount of harm. Notice he believes in morality. It's a different form, but he believes it. And those of you whose lives that I saved, right, from the aliens, by doing that, you might be disgusted at what I did, but you'd be alive rather than dead. So in that weird situation, which is hypothetical and extreme, would never happen, there are cases where what we think are right and wrong could be flipped around. But notice that's not the point here. The point is he does believe in morality, he just doesn't like God's morality. So Kyle proceeded to ask, okay, well, would you rape 2 people? How about 2,000? Would it be okay to rape 2 million? And Barker said, to save 6 billion? Yes. Yes, it would be, because otherwise you've got 6 billion deaths. Are you telling me we should not do what is morally necessary to do to minimize harm? And so notice atheists can't really help but talk about morals as though they're objective. Everybody should be doing this. You're telling me that you don't think we should be doing this? Right? So he believes in objective morality. But there can be nothing that is morally necessary if there is no moral law higher than humanity. And therefore, you've got to have a God. It doesn't matter what culture or setting a person grows up in. We understand even from a young age, even if we've never been taught about it, that there's right and wrong. Right? Just try this out. We know that it isn't right or fair if another person comes and takes something from us that isn't his. Right? That we didn't give that to him, or he didn't work for it, or whatever. We don't even have to learn that. We know it. That's not fair, we say. You ever hear kids say that? They don't have to be taught that. They understand the concept. We know, even if we're 3, okay, if I steal a cookie and my brother steals a cookie and I get in trouble and he doesn't, all right, we know that's not right. It's not just, and nobody has to tell me that. It's built into us. We understand that it's not fair if I work my whole life for something and somebody beats me up and takes it from me, even if it's the government. It's not right. Mankind understands that. We understand if we do a bunch of work writing a paper, someone comes and plagiarizes it. It's not right. Nobody has to tell me that. Now, we may accept these things and say, well, that's just the way of the world, move on. But the point is, we all know it's unfair, and it's not opinion to say that. Injustice is objectively wrong. We understand within us that there is a higher law that governs everyone about fairness and justice. It's above humans, and it's not subject to our opinions. Now, there can't be a higher justice code that is above the opinions of humanity without there being a justice code maker that wrote that law code. So objective morality illustrates there must be a God, and that is the moral argument. Concerning the fact that we intuitively understand fairness and justice, that we seem to have been built, we have a built-in program that governs human behavior about that. It's interesting to note the fact that in the Bible, the English words righteous and just can be translated interchangeably from their underlying biblical words, the Greek and the Hebrew words. In Hebrew, the word tzaddik can be translated righteous or just. In Greek, it's dikaios, and it can be translated righteous or just. Now think of the implication of that. What that means that whatever is right and wrong, righteousness comes down to fairness. Right? That God actually, that's how he defines what is right and wrong. So the fact that we've been programmed with a fairness meter means that we have a program that can be used to determine right and wrong, which means there is right and wrong that humans didn't make up. It's programmed into us, not developed by us. And so the minute a person admits that there are things that are objectively unfair for everyone, then he's admitting to the existence of objective moral value, a higher set of standards that could only have been instituted by a higher being. And in so doing, he's rejecting atheism. Another argument, what we call the intuitional argument. Humans are incurably religious. Our intuition tells us that we're supposed to be religious, that there's something beyond us that we're beholden to. Now, this seems to be just common sense to humanity. Again, as though we've been programmed to believe. According to adherence.com, some 92% of the world believes that there's something beyond the purely physical. And 86% of the world worships something, and the rest arguably worship themselves and each other. Animals, of course, don't do this, but humans have been built with this desire to worship something, and atheism can't explain this apparent instinctive tendency of humanity. Notice what Shermer admitted. We perceive nature to be intelligently designed. He admitted that. Since the most common reason people give for why they believe in God is the good design in the world, intelligent design creationists are tapping into the intuitive understanding most people hold about life and the universe. He comes on and acknowledges this is intuitive to us. It's common sense. It's logical to us. Dawkins, pulling out his hair here, says it's almost as if the human brain were specifically designed to find Darwinism hard to believe. You got to be taught how to not, how to reject the obvious in order to accept what he believes in. He said, why, if it is false, does every culture in the world have religion? True or false, religion is ubiquitous, so where does it come from, he says. Psychologists Paul Bloom and Dina Weisberg of Yale University and the University of Pennsylvania, respectively, they acknowledged there is by now a large body of research suggesting that humans are natural-born creationists. When we see non-random structure and design, we assume that it was created by an intelligent being, obviously. Geneticist Dean Hamer even wrote a book called The God Gene, where he acknowledges that humans seem to be hardwired to be religious. And his goal was to try to figure out how do we explain this without a God. And so he said, maybe there's a gene that is somehow passed down that makes you religious. And so they're trying to figure out how to deal with this because it seems to be so endemic to humanity, this religious inclination. Now, this is a problem for atheism. Why? Well, notice what Dawkins said. Religion is so wasteful, so extravagant, and Darwinian selection habitually targets and eliminates waste. One of the things it's supposed to be doing. All right, famous atheistic philosopher Daniel Dennett expounds on the problem of how costly religion is. The world is populated by billions of people, almost all of whom devote a significant fraction of their time and energy to some sort of religious activity. Rituals such as daily prayer, both public and private, or frequent attendance at ceremonies, but also costly sacrifices, not working on certain days, no matter what looming crisis needs prompt attention, and abiding by a host of strenuously observed prohibitions and requirements. So if evolution is true, why wasn't religion eliminated? Humans engage in this costly endeavor that should have worked against us if evolution is true and ultimately caused the demise of humans. So evolutionists are going to great lengths to try to explain how humans would be so religious. Dawkins has even blind faith proposed. There's no evidence for this, but he's proposed that maybe there's something like a virus that has infected humanity, and it's being passed down genetically through what he calls memes, and it makes religion spread. And so he's saying religion is like a virus. Okay, and I'm thinking, okay, even if that's true, isn't atheism its own virus too? I mean, how does that prove anything? Bottom line, there's no evidence for that. We want to be rational here. Remember, to be rational, law of rationality, one should only draw those conclusions that are warranted by the evidence. Where's the evidence for these memes? They don't exist. So humans are intuitively religious. That's the facts. Evolution should have eliminated it, didn't. Okay, well, that speaks to the fact that there has to be this being that programmed that into us. Notice what Acts 17 says, alluding, I think, to this idea. God has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth. Okay, how did he make them? And what did he make them to be like? Well, so that they should seek the Lord. He made us in a way where we want to seek him, and the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he's not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being. God put in us this inclination to be religious. That's the grace of God coming through right there. He put in us the desire to seek him, and then he makes sure that he's not far from us so that we can find him if we really dig in. Right? There's God's grace. He makes it where we can actually find him so that we can be saved. Here's another argument, the aesthetic argument. Beauty exists. And we have been given the capability of perceiving that and appreciating it. Now, atheism, again, can't adequately explain this because the appreciation for beauty, by and large, has no evolutionary advantage. And so this highlights the fact that there is a God who cares for his creation and wants to give us joy and pleasure. Now, Darwin recognized this argument as a threat to evolution. So in The Origin of Species, he said this: some authors believe that many structures have been created for the sake of beauty, to delight man or the creator, or for the sake of mere variety. Such doctrines, if true, would be absolutely fatal to my theory. Why? Well, because evolution can't explain how something would become beautiful for the sole benefit of other people. See, because evolution is survival of the fittest. It is the selfish battle of the strong for survival. It's not about others. So evolving a trait has to have a selfish benefit, not the benefit of others. Now, his argument was that beauty wasn't created. It just accidentally evolved, and then it stuck around in some cases, like in the beautiful male birds and so forth, because that beauty benefited those creatures in being able to get mates, so sexual selection. But then the ugly animals didn't get those mates, and so they tend to die out. All right. Now, my first problem with that is, you ever seen some ugly animals? There's some ugly animals out there. All right. Number two, Darwinian natural selection, even if that was true, Darwin's natural selection only explains the survival of the fittest, not the arrival of the fittest. They have no explanation for how to get the creature there in the first place. There is no known mechanism that can do this, because you have to generate new information in the genome, and there's no known natural way to do that. Mutations have been shown to not be able to do that. They don't provide new information that would be needed for there to be beauty where there once was no beauty. But also, number three, notice that natural selection doesn't explain why you have an innate appreciation of beauty in the first place. Okay, why do you get joy and pleasure and happiness merely by listening to beautiful music from an orchestra, or seeing a waterfall or a sunset? Sometimes these things will even be dangerous to you, but you can still perceive the beauty in it. While natural selection may explain why something beautiful tends to stick around, it doesn't explain why you even see that thing as beautiful in the first place. So why do you have an appreciation of beauty? And therein lies the argument for the existence of a loving God. He's made everything beautiful in its time, Ecclesiastes 3:11, things that are pleasant for the eyes, Ecclesiastes 11, verse 7. The ontological argument, we're going over these very briefly. These can all be delved into much deeper. And we have a book called Does God Exist? That goes real deep into these arguments. We skipped this one because it's a complicated argument, heavy in philosophy, and there's variations on this argument. Hard to use this to explain to people, but the general idea is you can't conceive of a quality, a characteristic that doesn't exist in some being, okay? So if you make up something you've never seen, just make up something in your mind, it's still going to be composed only of things you know exist. Okay, so make up a creature, so a four-headed dragon, it's got snakes for legs, there's fire coming out of its eye sockets, whatever you come up with, the creature is still composed of things you've seen and know exist. Heads, snakes, fire, eyes. You can't really come up with anything totally new. Something comprised of qualities that you don't already know exist. So the Star Trek characters and Star Wars and so forth, they're all made up of qualities that you know exist. So the ontological argument says you can't conceive of qualities, characteristics that don't exist in some being, but you can conceive of superlative characteristics, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, and so forth, indicating that they must exist in some being. Okay, so there's a lot more we could go into on that, but the bottom line is that's another strong argument for the existence of God. Then there's one of my favorites, the cosmological argument for the existence of God. You may have heard of this one a lot. So the cosmos, the universe, exists, and it demands an ultimate cause. It has to come from somewhere. Remember in Job chapter 38, God laid out the thrust of this argument when he's talking to Job. He asked Job about the creation of the earth and the universe. Where did it come from? Who created it? Who laid the foundations of the earth? Who determined its measurements? Who stretched the line upon it? Who laid its cornerstone? So the universe exists. It demands a cause. Now, there has to be a reason, a cause for the universe. Cause and effect. This is fundamental to science. This is what science is all about. Determining the effects of various causes and the causes of various effects. Now, if you want to be rational, then you have to accept the evidence. And the evidence says that the law of cause and effect, or the law of causality, governs the entire universe. And it basically says if you have an effect, there must logically be a cause. Now, more precisely, every material effect that we've ever seen must have an adequate antecedent or simultaneous cause. So the cause has to precede or come before the effect, or it can occur at the same time as the effect. And it has to have the necessary power or potential to cause the effect. So all natural effects that we've ever witnessed have causes. All right, well, we know that in nature an effect has a cause. The planets exist. They're moving through space. They're spinning. These are effects. Life, living things exist. That's an effect. They demand a cause. Someone has to cause these things to happen. The naturalist has no legitimate explanation that's actually based on the evidence for this. The mere existence of the cosmos is proof of the existence of a supernatural being that had to cause it. So how does the atheist try to deal with this? What cause can the atheist point to try to explain the existence of the universe without a God? Well, most of the naturalists today argue that the origin of the universe can be explained by this massive explosion from an extremely hot, tiny, dense ball billions of years ago. Now, even if that were true, of course we ask, where did the little ball come from, right? Now, if you're a naturalist and you don't accept the supernatural, you don't accept God, you've only got two options. Okay, either it created itself, okay, more technically we say this is spontaneous generation of the stuff that makes up the universe. It just popped into existence. Or it is self-existent. It's always existed, it's eternal. All right, so let's look at the first option here and look at the actual evidence. Again, we want to be rational here. Okay, so let's say that there is an invisible box that is around the blast radius of the supposed Big Bang. Let's just say the Big Bang happened. And there's this invisible box around the entire universe, okay? So this is a boundary layer big enough to hold all of the universe inside of it. Now, if you believe that the universe could spontaneously generate, just pop into existence on its own from nothing, which is what the bulk of the scientific community around us believes, then in a thermodynamic sense, you believe that this box was originally completely empty. Okay, so let's zoom inside of the box. Okay, you're inside of the box here. Now, the spontaneous generation model claims nobody put all the stuff in the universe. You just put itself here. And so according to this model, you can stand around inside of this box and stare into nothingness. And as long as you give it enough time, all of a sudden, pop, something can just appear. And not only could just something appear, but according to this version of the model, a little ball containing all of the mass and energy of the entire universe just popped into existence. And then, so they say, for some reason, the Big Bang process starts. And eventually, given enough time, you've got the stars and you've got the galaxies and you've got our solar system come into existence. Life somehow springs into existence. And then it evolves over time, and then eventually it turns into you. You accidentally show up. This is what is considered scientific today. It's really religious mumbo-jumbo. It's a modern, respectable form of witchcraft. Is really what it is. It's witchcraft without a witch, though. Really, right? Now, we got major problems with this when you look at the actual observable evidence. First law of thermodynamics, which is it is considered a super law in science because it is so substantiated. Other laws will be built based on certain lower laws that are considered more like bigger deals, okay? And this is one of those laws, okay? And it can be summarized by this statement by evolutionist Willard Young. Energy can be neither created nor destroyed, but can only be converted from one form to another. Okay, we also call this the law of conservation of matter and energy. All right, now what does this mean practically speaking? Well, have you ever thought about what happened to a log of wood when you burned it? Where did it all go? Okay, the pile of ash that's there, that alone can't account for it. So where did it go? Where's the stuff? Did it disappear from the universe? Was it destroyed, in other words? The first law says that in any process we've ever seen in the universe, like wood burning, the matter and energy that was there will change into other forms while it's going through its process, like heat, light, ash. But the sum total amount of energy in the universe that was present before you burn the wood equals the amount of energy in the universe after you burn the wood. Energy hasn't disappeared or been destroyed from the universe by burning it. Energy hasn't also been popped into existence. So using more technical terminology, first law of thermodynamics says that if you have a system, like a closed system, this also works in an open system, but in our case, we're looking at a closed system because you've got a box that has everything in the universe is already in there, so there's no energy coming into the system or leaving the system because the box already has everything in there. So no one's outside of the box. The amount of energy within the boundaries of that system will remain constant. That's what we're saying here. So as this chart shows, the amount of energy present before any process, like wood burning, okay, the amount of energy present before a process has to equal the amount of energy present after the process. So if you start with nothing in the box before a process, then guess what you're going to have after any process? This is real complicated, isn't it? Okay, things don't create themselves. That's what we're saying. Nothing comes from nothing. Unless you're a naturalist, you understand that's ridiculous. You can believe in that if you want, but it's a blind faith to do that. There's no evidence that that can happen. Now keep in mind, according to the first law of thermodynamics, this is true and there are no exceptions to this, or this wouldn't be a law based on the definition. So by implication, it would be unscientific. It would go against the laws of science to believe that matter and energy could come into being in such a way that the first law of thermodynamics would have to be violated. According to the first law of thermodynamics, the only way you can get matter and energy in that box, if it wasn't already there before, is if there's something outside of the box that put it there. That's what science tells you has to be the case. I don't even have to see God to know it. The evidence is clear. That's why Romans 1:20. The evidence is clearly seen by the things that are made. We can figure this out. We don't even have to see God. What about the second option? This one is not even accepted by people. This used to be more a dominant belief in the scientific community a few decades ago, before the Big Bang became a prominent idea. Could matter and energy have always existed? Could the universe be eternal, the stuff of the universe? Well, so this model would claim the universe has always been here inside of the box. No one put it here. It's always been there, either moving through space forever, expanding, or if you believe in the oscillating universe model, you believe the universe operates in a cycle where you have a collapse and then a big bang and then an expansion and then another collapse, a big bang, expansion. So like a big accordion going on forever. Okay, this repeating, oscillating. But either way, this is saying the stuff of the universe is eternal. It's always been here. Now, well-known atheist, physicist, cosmologist, and astrobiologist of Arizona State University, Paul Davies, writing in New Scientist, notice what he said. The celebrated second law of thermodynamics says, roughly speaking, that in any change, the universe becomes a slightly more disorderly place. The entropy goes up, the information content goes down. This natural tendency towards disintegration and chaos is evident all around us. All right, so what are the implications of this? Well, in a technical sense, the second law of thermodynamics builds on the first law, and it says that, okay, even though you have the same amount of energy in any kind of process before and after the process, some of that energy will transform into less usable energy, and we call that entropy. And this is an irreversible process, which is already a problem for the atheist too. Why is there even a law here that's forcing it to why wouldn't it go the opposite direction? But anyway, any kind of process we've seen, This is always what happens. Now, what this means practically speaking is what Paul Davies said. Everything is wearing out. It's disintegrating. And as he said, you can see this everywhere. Does a car get nicer on its own over time? Wouldn't that be nice? You get onto the junkyard and you get a clunker and just wait, just sit there and stare at it. Eventually it's going to turn into a Ferrari, okay? Mint condition. Wouldn't that be nice? No, we got a big rule in the universe that says, sorry, that's not going to happen. Kids, wouldn't it be nice if your room tended towards order instead of the opposite? Parents, wouldn't that be nice if that would be the case? Wouldn't it be nice if your house got nicer and you weren't constantly having to work on it to keep it from falling down? I mean, I feel like I need a t-shirt that says Entropy Fighter. I mean, isn't that pretty much what our life is about? Everything is wearing out our bodies and we're constantly having to fight it. Now, returning to our wood burning example, when the wood burns, all the energy that was present before it burned is still present after it burns, according to the first law. According to the second law, much of it is transforming into less usable forms of energy. So after that heat, for example, dissipates, you're essentially left with this pile of ash, which is, of course, not nearly as usable. Now again, just like with the first law, the second law has no exceptions. It's never been broken. To date, no experiment has been conducted that contradicts the second law, and this should be taken as sufficient proof of its validity. Unfortunately, some people don't accept the evidence because they are irrational. They want to have a blind faith. Now, what does this mean with regard to the origins question? What's the implication? Well, it means the universe could not have always existed, or we wouldn't have usable energy anymore. According to the second law of thermodynamics, if the universe is infinite in age, it should be totally broken down to a state of heat death. Okay? We wouldn't have any more usable energy. And yet we have this abundant amount of usable energy in harmony with the biblical creation model that argues that the universe is relatively young. Again, this is one of the reasons why the scientific community around us has finally accepted the universe couldn't be eternal. But interestingly, the biblical model, not only is it in harmony with these laws, it even predicts, for example, in the case of the second law, it predicts decay and a gradual loss of usable energy long before we even discovered the second law of thermodynamics in the 1800s. Notice, for example, what is stated in Hebrews 1, quoting from Psalm 102, as we're talking about 3,000 years ago, this is stated, "You, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you remain. They will all grow old like a garment, like a cloak. You'll fold them up and they'll be changed, but you're the same and your years will not fail." You know, the Bible is not a science textbook. If anything, it's closer to a history book. But anything that it says with regard to scientific matters is also always perfectly accurate. And this is the second law of thermodynamics. Again, written 3,000 years ago by somebody who didn't claim to have that knowledge on his own. He claimed to be inspired by God. God gave him that info. According to the laws of science, specifically the first and second laws of thermodynamics, which have no exceptions, we're trying to follow the evidence here, matter could not have created itself, first law of thermodynamics. It couldn't be eternal, according to the second law of thermodynamics, and those are the only two options you have if you're an atheist. So the evolutionary model is not possible. So that leaves some form of creation. Now on top of that, the creation model is supported by both of these. In fact, you can find the first and second laws in the Bible. So if you stick with the scientific evidence rather than blindly accepting what the naturalistic community is shoving down our throat, then the evidence clearly points to God. You just have to follow the evidence. The universe is here. It couldn't create itself. It requires a creator. That is the cosmological argument. We need a being outside of the box to explain the evidence. Another classical argument for the existence of God, the teleological argument. And this is especially interesting to engineers because it involves design. Atheistic philosopher and professor Paul Ricci said, "It's true that everything designed has a designer, of course." And this basically summarizes the point we make with regard to the teleological argument. If there is design in the universe, then there had to be a universe designer. Now, generally, people like Ricci admit that basic truth. Now, they just refuse to admit that there is design in the universe, but they at least concede if there was design, then there would have to be a designer. Now, try to get them to pinpoint what would they have to see to prove that there is design, and they're not going to be able to put their finger quite on that. But I think we can help them if you just are logical about this. Can you have a poem without there being a poet? A painting requires a painter. A fingerprint requires a finger. This is logical, right? Design requires a designer. So the question then is, what exactly is design, and does the universe have this? There's an infinite number of examples that we could give to show this. Things that show things like intention, purpose, complexity. Right? These are the things that the words that are used to describe what we mean by design. They require a mind. And there's so many examples of design. Notice what Shermer said. The design inference comes naturally. The reason people think that a designer created the world is because it looks designed. Thank you. We perceive nature to be intelligently designed based on our experience of human artifacts. In other words, it's based on the actual evidence. This isn't a blind faith. We know some human artifacts are intelligently designed because we've observed them being made, and we have vast experience with human artificers. Recall this statement. Since the most common reason people give for why they believe in God is the good design of the world, intelligent design creationists are tapping into the intuitive understanding most people hold about life and the universe. So notice again, this is intuitive, that there's design. One of the areas that I did study in school was thermal design. So this is of special interest to me because I just didn't hear a lot about this. But this is just another powerful area of the universe that shows the necessity of there being a God. So this biothermal system is the system in your body that oversees how your body responds to temperature fluctuations. So temperature changes in your environment and in your body, and the body does this through this extremely complex thermoregulatory system. Okay, this is the system that regulates your temperature. So let's just, I could do an entire session just on this, but let's just look at a couple details of this very sophisticated system and just logically think. Does this seem to indicate an engineer, or that it just did this on its own accidentally? The entire temperature system in your body, as you might expect, is controlled by your brain, and the processing center in the brain that controls the biothermal system is the hypothalamus. This is basically the thermostat for the body's air conditioning system. So it controls the system, and it uses temperature sensors like thermometers or thermocouples in engineering, and they're called thermoreceptors. And these sensors are located strategically throughout your body in key places, and they read the temperature wherever they are. You've got them in your hypothalamus, you've got them in your skin, your bladder, even in your eyes. And the thermoreceptors in your skin are the peripheral nerves, and they're constantly detecting changes in the external temperature in the environment, in the air and so forth. And the thermoreceptors in the hypothalamus are actually reading your blood temperature all the time. And all this information is being sent to the hypothalamus, where the hypothalamus can adjust your body's thermoregulatory functions using what are called effector nerves. And these are like power lines that are used to communicate between the hypothalamus and various parts of the body to initiate various kinds of responses to temperature. Does this sound like something that just accidentally happened? Let's just be logical here and rational. This is a very sophisticated system that wouldn't make sense for this to be random accidents. So let's look at a couple of other examples here of what the hypothalamus does. The bladder's detrusor muscle. There are thermoreceptors in your bladder that are taking the temperature of the liquid therein, right? Sending that information up the hypothalamus along these power lines, the effector nerves. Now, as the temperature of the bladder drops due to getting cold, a bladder cooling reflex is triggered in the hypothalamus. The message is sent down to the detrusor muscle on the bladder, urging it to contract. So the detrusor contraction makes you feel the urge to get that cooler liquid out of your body to keep your body's core temperature regulated. Now again, how did that happen by accident? How could you even have the knowledge to come up with a system on the fly like that? the muscle, the sensors, the nerves connecting the bladder all the way to the hypothalamus. This all had to be planned out and in working order from the beginning. How effective would an effector nerve be that only went halfway between the bladder and the brain? Well, that wouldn't be very effective, would it? I mean, this mechanism had to be already in place. This shows design, intention, planning, okay? When you look at this without bias, this is obvious. This is common sense. That's why Shermer has to say things like, well, I mean, it does look design. I mean, you got to try to just ignore the common sense evidence to come up with some other option. Why would you want to do that? That's the problem. People don't want God. That's the issue. This isn't the evidence. The evidence is clear. If you accept God, there's other things that come with that people don't want. It's been that way all the way back to Adam and Eve. It's always been the same. There's no way around it. The natural order, in its complexity and ingenuity, it is simply stunning. And I'm not the only one acknowledging that. There's an area of engineering that is growing by leaps and bounds across the world. It's called biomimicry, as well as bio-inspired design. And this is where engineers use nature as a blueprint and try to copy it. Okay, the webpage for George Washington University's Center for Biomimetics and Bio-Inspired Engineering says, however, despite our seeming prowess in these component technologies, we find it hard to outperform nature in this arena. Nature's solutions are smarter, more energy efficient, agile, adaptable, fault-tolerant, environmentally friendly, and multifunctional. Thus, there is much that we as engineers can learn from nature as we develop the next generation machines and technologies. In other words, nature is well designed. These are things that engineers are trying to do with our designs, and nature's done it and done it way better. So here's just one example. Engineers are more and more coming to the realization that insects function amazingly well when you consider the fact that their brains have less than 0.01% as many neurons as do human brains. Their ability to maneuver, especially in the air, we can't compete with this in engineering. And one of the insect features that engineers have discovered in the last few years is that many insects are equipped with a sophisticated engineering sensor that helps the insect to keep track of its orientation and stay upright while it's in the air. Ocelli are small eyes located on the heads of various kinds of insects that are in addition to those larger compound eyes that you can see more easily, and you typically think of those as the insect's eyes, but these are actually different eyes. They're little sensors that are horizon sensors. They're dedicated to that purpose, locating the horizon to help the insect keep track of its orientation in flight. Oh, so with these ocelli in mind, engineers started trying to mimic these sensors in the design of aerial vehicles. Engineers from Caltech and Australian National University in association with NASA designed a biomorphic ocellus mimicking the ocelli of dragonflies in order to try to achieve an improved flight stabilization system for aerial vehicles. Now again, when engineers engage in this kind of design, they're acknowledging the awesomeness of the natural realm and the presence of design in the universe, whether or not they mean to. They're saying, we can't compete with this. We got to just try to copy it. Like, we couldn't come up with that. Again, you're going to irrationally say that just happened on its own. Again, you can do that. You just need to understand you're the one with the blind faith, not me. That's the bottom line here. I'm being rational. This demands an engineer. Well, there's many, many other powerful evidences of design we could look at. This just gives you a taste of that evidence. We could do an entire session just on that. All right, now, before we end this session, I did want to highlight for you, I'm going to try to highlight some things that are back in the back. So that there's so much material that I brought. I want to make sure you understand what's back there so that you can think about it, about whether you need it for your library. You know, we're up to actually nearly 8 billion people on the planet now. And you think about the composition of the people on the planet. Nearly 2 billion Islamic people, Hinduism, unaffiliated, this includes your atheists and your irreligious, that's at least 1.2 billion. Christianity, 2.3 billion, half of those are Catholic, and of course the bulk of the rest of those are not they don't really believe what the Bible teaches on so many different doctrinal things. Now, when we think about passages like, for example, 1 Peter 3:15, that tells us that we're all supposed to be apologists, right? The underlying word for defense there, apologia. Christians are to be ready to give a defense to everyone. Be ready in season and out of season. We think about passages like that, it should be concerning to us if we're not spending some time making sure we're aware of the kind of things that people believe around us and make sure we're ready to talk about those things with them. When I say to the wicked, you shall surely die, and you give him no warning, nor speak to warn the wicked from his wicked way to save his life, okay, that same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I'll require at your hand. Yet if you warn the wicked, and he does not turn from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you have delivered your soul. You know, we try to take this seriously, I hope, as Christians. And we need to make sure we're ready. We know the arguments, what they're going to be. We're ready to deal with these things so that we can stem some of the flow that's going on as the church is falling away. Huge percentages of the church, 4 out of 10 of our young people are leaving the church when they leave home. Do you know that? And it's over these kind of things. They don't know that there are arguments to respond to the things they're hearing in the world. We haven't prepared them. That is the purpose of this organization that I work at. And, you know, we've got so much going on, all of us as Christians. Who has time to sit down and figure out how to respond to the multiverse and quantum mechanics? Okay, so thankfully there's an organization like Apologetics Press that has done this work for you. Okay, we've tried to we've done the work for you. We've packaged it in a way where you can take these things and use them in your own evangelism. Make sure that you're ready to defend the truth and talk to other people about these things. So, you know, I'm not making money off of these things that I'm selling. This is all the money goes straight back into producing more stuff. The point of bringing all this is to make sure you have what you need to defend the truth, to make sure your young people know the issues and are ready to talk about them to other people, and can strengthen their own faith as well. So this weekend, be sure to let me know if you have any questions about the things that are back there, and I'll try to talk about some of the products as we go along through these sessions, so that you can be aware of those and know what else, know what you might need for your library. Okay, let's take a break. David, where are you at? What do you think? How much time do you want to give them? 15 minutes? All right. And then we'll come back for our second session.
Staff in the other room.